There are people in this room that I have admired all my life. We just had Rosh Kol and Rebbitzin in our house about a year ago, and it was just an unbelievably uplifting experience just to host them in the house. Rabbi Shachter is doing scholar residence in our shul. Never saw you speak with that kind of passion in our shul. So we have to come back and do it. Rabbi Weil has been a major leader for us in Atlanta. He's brought together Rabbanim. I've merited being part of a group that Rabbi Weil has put together under the OU-ZGIS, the Legacy Group, which has really been a fantastic experience for me to connect with other Rabbanim around the country. This topic, actually, for me, is not a new one, and I don't even know exactly what you mean when you talk about the courage or the boldness of the OU. I think this is exactly where we have to be. I want to tell you a little story by way of introducing something that I want to pass out to you. Rabbis have a real dilemma all the time. We can either focus on what's right or we can focus on what's wrong. So I'm by nature focused on what's wrong. That's my problem. No matter what's going on that's beautiful, I'm always focusing on what's wrong. But a couple of years ago, even someone who would focus only on what's right would have had to have some kind of an adjustment in his thinking in my community. Which means I'm proud of my community, wonderful, holy, growing people, thriving, no question about it. All kinds of Jews, all kinds of spiritual accomplishments, transcendence, no question about it. And a couple of years ago, we experienced a cluster of personal tragic disasters. I don't mean death. I'm talking about spiritual disasters. I'm talking about marriages falling apart in unseemly ways. I'm talking about relationships that were inappropriate. I'm talking about children that had run-ins with their parents in very public ways. And we're not a tiny community, but we're also not Los Angeles, which means that everybody knows everybody's business. And we're all connected. And my wife and I looked at this, and we were so disturbed, not so much by the events themselves, which were terribly painful, but by the conversation that occurred in the community. When I started hearing people say, Rabbi, what's happening to us? What's wrong with us? I realized that we were actually not armed with a counter conversation to denigration and to dismantling of a spiritual structure. What I mean by that is that a community is really defined by how it talks. That's really what makes a community a community. If you're a community of sports fans, what makes you a community of sports fans is that you talk about your team. If a community of sports fans gets together and doesn't talk about the team, they are not a community of sports fans. Is that right? So if you're a community of Torah Jews and you get together and you don't talk Torah language, then you're not a community of Torah Jews. You're a community of people who happen to be religious, but you are a community defined by what you talk about. And if you're talking about what's wrong with us, then you're a community of what's wrong with us. So we said we have to create a different conversation. We actually have to introduce into the community a vocabulary that is a vocabulary for the community, so that the community actually can be armed with a spiritual language. Now, before I pass out something that will give you an example of how we did this and how it works, because I think you can actually visually see it and apply it immediately to life. And I will say that I'm amazed if we had coordinated more than we did. We didn't even speak. Right? We had never even met. If we had coordinated more, we would not have done a better job. I actually have an exercise that has to do with preparing for Shabbos. And I had no idea that was going to come up tonight in the conversation. But before I pass that out, I want you to note something very, very important. It's a power and a tool that every one of us has that we don't usually own up to. I'm talking about the power of our words. I'm talking about the fact that we as human beings are creative mostly by what we say. And the reason we are that way is because we're created in God's image. And God himself is creative by what he says. And God said, "Ba'asara ma'amaros nivra ha'olam." The world was created by God speaking. And then God creates human beings, And those human beings are created in his image, and we're given the power of speech. And speech is the most creative thing we can do. There are many things we can do that's creative. But the most creative thing is speech itself. And therefore, it's important for us to actually be responsible for the speaking, to notice what we're saying to ourselves and to notice what we're saying to each other. But more than that, not just to be responsible. If we want to actually be creative, we actually should know where the power lies, and that's going to be in the way we talk. And I'm not talking about lashon hara, I'm not talking about destructive speech, I'm talking about speech that describes the world around us. See, we normally think that we behave a certain way, and that creates our spiritual reality. It's really not true. Our spiritual reality is created first, and the way we look at the world then governs our behavior. And so we can actually take responsibility to talk a certain way about ourselves and about the world around us, and that actually will alter our behavior. It is not true that people end up being spiritual. People don't end up being spiritual because somehow they were born into it, or they were inspired, or they had an experience. That happens. But if people are spiritual, it's because they actually chose to take steps to look at the world in a certain way. And we don't always realize that we have that power. And so what we tried to do a couple of years ago is introduce into the community the power of declaring how you are going to be looking at things. And it sounds a little bit esoteric, but when I pass this, where is this, Rabbi? Thank you very much. Okay, very good. Okay, good. All right, I've got two sheets here. One is about Shabbos, and one is relationship and marriage and relationships. And as I'm going to let this, as this gets, as it's passed out, let me introduce this to you. Let's look at Shabbos. So we know there's problems with Shabbos. We know exactly what the problems with Shabbos are. Every single one of us has experienced at least one Shabbos where we did not care. Most of us have. If we haven't, we might have been sleeping or sick, and therefore we didn't know that we didn't care. But at least one time in our lives, we've had an experience of, here comes Shabbos, I'm glad I don't have to work, I'm glad I don't have the pressure, but I'm not really interested in davening, I'm not interested in Zmiros, I'm not interested in the Torah, I'm not interested in seeing anybody, I don't want to see my family, I just want to relax, or something like that. Certainly, I'm not aware of God. That kind of Shabbos, I think we've had at least once in our lives. Some of us have it very, very often. I hear it in my office. People say to me, Rabbi, I'm tired of this. I don't get anything out of it. I don't know what to do. My wife likes it. I don't like it. I don't know what to do. So Shabbos is really a challenge, especially if you're born into it. If you chose it as an adult, maybe it's exciting. Maybe somehow you still with the inspiration that got you to choose it. But if you're born into it, it's a big challenge. So we took the statement of the sages, which was just quoted a couple of times, Hatareach be'erev Shabbos yochal b'Shabbos. By the way, Susie's standing right here. Susie threw this together today at the last minute. I emailed the PDF to her, and she made this happen like this. So thank you very, very much. Appreciate it. So, one who toils on Erev Shabbos will eat on Shabbos. So in the simplest possible interpretation, that means that if you peel the potatoes and get the beans and get the flanken and throw it into a crock pot before Shabbos, then you'll be able to eat challah on Shabbos. That's in the simplest possible interpretation, which of course the sages mean much more than that. The sages mean that the results of Shabbos can only be realized by the investment in Shabbos that occurs before Shabbos. And that means that we actually create an attitude towards Shabbos. It doesn't just happen. It doesn't just happen that a person says, wow, that would be great if I would love Shabbos before Shabbos, and then he loves Shabbos. It doesn't happen that way. A person actually has to create an approach. So the way one does that is to actually notice what is going on in one's talking to oneself. What are you saying to yourself? And once you locate yourself in one of the worlds that's described on this sheet of paper, once you locate where you are, you then can actually choose to put yourself in the other one. So for example, let's say that a person is exhausted as Thursday night comes. Let's say you're a housewife, excuse the sexism, but it's mostly housewives who prepare for Shabbos physically in the kitchen. Okay, let's say you're a housewife and you're exhausted on a Thursday night. And here it goes again, I gotta get and I got guests coming and I'm frustrated and I'm really resentful because my husband invited people without coordinating with me, and now people are coming, and now I thought I was gonna have an off Shabbos, and now I have to throw in and make it fancier, and I have all kinds of extra, I have to at least minimally respect the guests, or you just don't like it. You just don't like the cooking anymore. So after you notice yourself that way, you can locate yourself in the world of slavery, which means you hear what you're saying, and then you simply look and see. Okay, this is just obviously an illustration. You see where you are. In what world are you in based on what you're saying? I feel alone. No one helps me for Shabbos. No one helps me get ready. Why does it always have to be me? How come nobody else pitches in? Right? So there's all kinds of complaints that we have. And very often, those complaints collectively create what we experience as Shabbos is coming and I'm not ready, because we're resisting it, because we're in this world of slavery, we're in this world of resistance, we're in this world of frustration, and in that world, Shabbos is going to come at the last possible minute. We don't want it anywhere near us. So a person has to be aware of what he's saying. I'm exhausted, I have low energy, I'm frustrated, I feel alone, I'm obligated, I have no excitement about it. Fine, there's nothing wrong, you're not a bad person, that's just where you are. Once you notice that that's where you are, you actually have the opportunity to relocate yourself somewhere else. You can actually state something else. You can actually say, what would it sound like if I actually love Shabbos? I don't love Shabbos. At this minute, I'm really frustrated. I don't love Shabbos. What would it sound like if I love Shabbos? What would I be saying? How would I be approaching it? Well, I would be fulfilled in preparing for Shabbos. I would feel a sense of love if I was preparing for Shabbos. I would have a sense of inspiration if I was preparing for Shabbos. And then a person can actually choose artificially, yes, without inspiration, choose to state to him or herself something about Shabbos that is not in the circle of slavery. You actually say to yourself, Shabbos is coming and it's an opportunity for me. And when a person actually notices and discerns that he or she is in a different world, and a person has a choice of what world to be in, at that point, a person has created a totally different attitude. See, the thing is that we're creative with our mouths. Once we create, once we state, once we put out there for ourselves or for others a certain statement, we then start living into it. Our behavior then follows the actual, the world that we've created. So on the back of this sheet, I'll give you an example of certain exercises that created the context for a person to be able to start preparing for Shabbos in a different way. So we called exercise number 1, change your Shabbos clock. Okay, so we said pull your Shabbos preparations back a day. Shop a day earlier, set the table a day earlier. It'll change your preparations from burden, excuse the misprint here, from burden to anticipation. Right? Just simply the act of preparing earlier or doing a piece of the preparation, not the whole thing. You can't change your whole schedule on Thursday, but something earlier. The act of doing it earlier changes your whole mindset because you've now taken an action which is consistent with an entirely different world view. Exercise number 2, we called it I declare. Learn the power of declaration from our sages. Make declarations as you prepare. We see this all the time. L'shem Shabbos Kodesh. This is something that we've heard all the time throughout the generations. So when you say it, you're actually then focused on something purposeful as opposed to, here's a task that I've got to get done before I go to bed, before I wake up to work, before I rush to work, before I come home, before I light candles. You're actually saying, I'm doing this for the sake of Shabbos. It changes your experience of the action by saying it. If that doesn't do it for you, make declarations like, I'm setting a table fit for a king. There's nothing wrong with saying that while you are frustrated. Because the moment you say that, you will have to give up your frustration in favor of the awareness that I'm setting a table fit for a king, Shabbos Malchus. But you have to be willing to say it. That's where being responsible comes in. That's where you actually have choices. I'm making the beds to create a place of honor for Shabbos. You make up your own, but say it and don't think it. And I have put in here, men, don't be afraid to be corny, because men hate this. Men will never be caught saying something so corny, but do it anyway. No one will question your manner. Now, Shabbos GPS, this third exercise, practice determining your location in the two worlds of Shabbos, It's Your Choice handout, and your ability to navigate from slavery to creativity. As you prepare for Shabbos, ask yourself what words from the two worlds describe your feelings. If you find yourself in the world of creativity, Mazel Tov, find someone else to share yourself with. And if you find yourself in the world of slavery, move over because it's crowded there. Note the world you're in. Choose a word from the other world of creativity. Try this. It sounds artificial, but when you actually give yourself the ability to discern where you are and you own it, I'm now speaking a language of slavery. I'm relating to this as slavery. What would a different language sound like? The moment you do that, you're in a different world. The only time you are a slave is when you don't know what's owning you. The moment you identify what's running your show, at that moment you have become a master of that statement. You might still want to say it, but now you have to willfully choose to stay in the world of slavery. You actually can say something else. Same thing with marriage. Does everybody have a marriage handout? We'll go through this quickly just to show you how it works. It's really the same two worlds. We just used different words to describe marriage and relationships. Because in relationships, what happens is, what keeps us separate from each other? We're judgmental, we're cynical, we undervalue other people, we're tired and withdrawn, we see people as obstacles to getting to where we want to go, so we manipulate them. That would be the world of cynicism, the world of distance, the world of separation. Then there's a world of wonder, because relationships are actually exciting. Because when you're in a relationship with another person, whether it's a friend or a relative or a spouse, there's actually discovery. There's actually something unknown. There's actually something creative and something new going on all the time. And so here also, when you start noticing the world you're in and you take responsibility to create a different mindset, a different worldview, you can actually create an entirely different world. We said, when I say we, as my wife and I, we said that the goal of this whole thing, we called it Building Blocks of Community. It was a program, it's still running as a matter of fact. It's a program designed to identify the critical aspects of Jewish life in a vibrant Orthodox community, and then to create a vocabulary so that a community can actually be involved in talking about things in an entirely different way. So we created a website so that people would then do these exercises and then anonymously or by name say, I tried it and it didn't work, or I tried it and I got fantastic results. And then somebody else would write in and say, well, it didn't work so well for me. And then there was a conversation going on, actually on the website, people talking back and forth to each other about how they got ready for Shabbos, which means the goal here was not to educate people. Our contention was that everybody knows what to do. The goal here was actually to create a discussion in the community so that people actually had started getting the hang of what it is for a community to be defined by what it believes in, rather than everybody going through life kind of alone and not really discussing it with each other. We've had some very interesting results. I'll just give you one example. We had a session after davening on Shabbos when we introduced the Shabbos building block, and I asked people, do you say Kiddush on Friday night as if it's the last Kiddush you'll ever make? Right? Do you do that? Or do you say Kiddush in order to be able to wash so you can sit down and eat, right? How do you say Kiddush? So one guy, and this guy is not well known for his religiosity or his spirituality, one guy stands up, he says, I do. I said, Alan, you say Kiddush that way every week? He says, I absolutely do. The only thing I do for Shabbos is say Kiddush. My wife slaves and toils and prepares for guests and gets the house ready, and all I do is Kiddush, and therefore I feel that I need to invest my entire being in reciting Kiddush. All right, so now Alan took on for the whole community, he said this in front of 100 people, he took on for the community, his name was Kiddush Alan. All right, now, but the point is, when Alan walked around, everybody now saw the potential of making Kiddush as if it's the last Kiddush of their lives. If you knew you'd never make Kiddush again, it would be an entirely different thing. Which means you do have the power of changing the way you relate to something. You are not stuck with the way you are. If you change the way you viewed it, this is the last Kiddush I'll ever make, God forbid. It's the last one. For some people it is, and they don't know it. We all know people like that. They didn't know that on Friday night it was their last Kiddush. If you change the way you look at it, then you change your actions. And that's the point. We have the power of changing the way we look at our Jewish lives. The only reason that we sometimes find ourselves disempowered and bored and habitual and really not fresh and not creative is because we forgot that we ourselves are the masters of our spiritual destinies. We can actually choose what world we're going to live in. But in order to choose it, you have to be able to discern. And in order to discern, you have to know that there are two worlds. And so this is really what I consider to be spirituality. Spirituality is actually behaving as if God is in your world real. And the one way that you behave as if God is in your world really is that you imitate Him. And if God is creative through using His power of speech, kaviyachol, then human beings should be creative in the most powerful possible way by using the way they talk about their own lives. So it's really in your hands. As a human being, you actually have the ability to create a spiritual world. But you have to be responsible for it. You have to know where you are. This is just an example of how this works. And I think it really, in a certain sense, supplements the kinds of things that were said by the previous speakers in the sense that the spirituality doesn't happen to you. You create it for yourself. And your spiritual destiny is really in your own hands. Thank you very much for the opportunity. It's been great being here. And I don't know what you're rather want to do now.
I want to thank everyone so much for joining us this evening. Just a few brief announcements before everyone takes off. First of all, there is a collation in the adjoining room. Everyone should please help themselves to refreshments. The convention is only beginning tonight. It continues throughout your individual shul and community over the course of the next several days. Please take a schedule, enjoy all the different events. Our next communal event will be Sunday morning at Young Israel of Century City. Sunday morning, starting at 9:30 in the morning, we have Shiurim from Rav Schechter, Rabbi Sobolovsky, Mrs. Tessler, and Mrs. Weil, followed by a communal panel. So again, we wish that everyone will join us on Sunday, and an Erev Shabbos Kodesh, a wonderful good Erev Shabbos.